Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Schmertz. A big win for U.S. automakers in May as buyers returned to the showroom and drove cars off the lots. Sales were helped in May because there were 5 weekends and, of course, the Memorial Day holiday. Chrysler, which is owned by Fiat, led the way with a 17% increase in year-over-year sales. General Motors, despite recalls and lots of bad press, chimed in with a 12.6% increase led by Chevy. GM says this was the best month it had since August of 2008. And Ford notched a 3% gain with its best ever May. We'll have more on the auto sales in a moment, but first let's take a look at how the markets finished the day. The Dow Jones Industrial Average. The Dow Jones Industrial Average. Those are factory orders. We'll start with factory orders. A strong sign U.S. manufacturing is picking up steam and stabilizing. The Commerce Department said today that new orders for manufactured goods increased 0.7% in April, rising for the third straight month. Now, we're going to go to the markets as promised. Dow Jones Industrial Average backing off record highs from yesterday, down 20.5 to 16,723. The S&P 500 down 0.75 of a dollar, rather, to 1924, and the Nasdaq back off by 312 to 4234. Some of our top stocks we're watching today. Facebook announcing that it is acquiring Prite. The company based in Finland helps those living in underdeveloped parts of the world gain better access to the web. Facebook closing down 13 cents. Major foods company J.M. Smucker, with a name like Smucker's, raised the price of its packaged coffee products sold in the U.S. by 9% today. The company says the ongoing drought in Brazil is to blame. Folgers and Dunkin' Donuts packaged brands are also among those included in the hike. Smucker's up 42 cents. And the popular hot glazed donut chain Krispy Kreme shares tumbling the most in 6 months after cutting its earnings forecast. The company says earnings this year will be 69 to 74 cents a share compared with the 79 cents analysts are expecting. Krispy Kreme closing down $2.79 to $16.21. Commodities, gold up $2 and oil to $102.78. U.S. automakers are riding strong, reporting higher than expected new car sales in May. Sales rose by more than 11%, topping 1.6 million last month, the industry's strongest annual sales rate since before the 2008 recession. As we mentioned before, General Motors, Ford, Chrysler, Toyota, and Nissan all beating analysts' expectations. GM and Chrysler reporting sales were the best in May in 7 years, and Nissan says it set a record for sales for the month. That is great news for the economy, but will it last? For that, we turn to Dan Wiener. He is CEO of Advisor Investments. Dan, welcome back to Arisexchange.
Thank you.
So let's start with auto sales. It was a very soft start in the first quarter. What happened here?
The weather.
There we go.
It's a beautiful day in June. It'd be silly to expect anything but a huge rebound in auto sales after what we saw in the first couple of months of the year. The first quarter, everybody knows now, GDP was off a tiny bit. But you're seeing a rebound in a lot of economic indicators. Cars, cars and light trucks, they're selling at almost 17 million on an annual pace. Ford's F-150 just keeps cranking.
And we still have a lot of pent-up demand, don't we, from a recession where people were keeping cars like 8 to 10 years.
Much longer on the road. I don't want to tell you how old our car is. But yes, people have kept their cars longer, and now you've got this pent-up demand added to by the fact that the weather just kept people off the lots and off the roads and off the lots. And now they're in the showrooms, they're on the lots, and they're buying.
I wonder if the automakers are a little worried because it turns out the cars will last a decade. You don't need to go replace one every 3 years.
That's right. But, because so many people lease cars now, there's constant turnover. There's a lot more turnover. And, I remember when we were talking back in 2008, 2009 about how the auto industry and auto sales just collapsed. Well, cars were on the road longer, but their cars got more rattles in them. They got more mileage on them. Now it's time to replace them.
And if you believe that the recovery was eventually going to come, which it sort of had to, then this would have been a possible good investment opportunity a few years ago. You just didn't know when it would come.
Right, you didn't know. And of course, if you look at GM and some of the issues they've been dealing with the last couple of months,
But they surprised everyone here. A lot of analysts said, you know what, GM will shake this off and the cars are still going to sell. And that's
right. Well,
here.
Clearly consumers, I mean, if you're a consumer and GM has just been pilloried the way they have been, you're going to think, you know what, they're really going to take care of the cars they build for the next few years. They're not going to go through this again.
Let's talk about the economic data generally. Do you think that we're starting to see positive trends? Yesterday we got this manufacturing number, which was lousy in the beginning, then it was great in the middle of the day, and then it was kind of like, okay, decent enough by the
Well,
end of
the
the
first
day.
two numbers,
Because
the first two
ISM
numbers
screwed it up.
didn't count.
Right.
They screwed that up. But, manufacturing, industrial production, all of these numbers are confirming what everybody said, which was, you know what, it was a terrible winter, it was a horrible first quarter, we're going to see some improvements. What we've seen in the April data, what we're starting to see in some of the May data that's coming out is there are improvements. There are a few, black clouds still hanging over some of it. It's not all, hitting on all 12 cylinders and going. But it is coming. We're going to get a big employment report at the end of the week. That's going to be interesting to see.
That'll be the main numbers. All right, let's turn to the stock market, and this is the big question. When is the correction coming? Because this bull market is getting long in the legs.
It's not that long in the legs, but it is coming. When? I have no idea.
Because then we won't be making money.
But, we did some research recently that looked at intra-year declines. On average, over the last 25 years, small stocks have given you an intra-year decline of just under 19%. We haven't seen one of those. We haven't seen even a decline of 10% in a year or two.
Final question. Jim Awad said yesterday, one key sign that the market would head for a correction if we get some inflation numbers that are ugly.
Well, we already got some inflation numbers that were a lot higher than we thought. The PCE came in, at about around 1.6%. That's a lot more inflation than we've seen of late. But what's ugly? I mean, I'd like to see some inflation. It would mean that the economy is picking up steam and that there's demand out there.
Okay, Dan Wiener with Advisor Investments. Thank you so much.
Sure thing.
Okay, talk to you soon. It's Apple's world. We just live in it. That's the clear goal of the world's largest company. This week, Apple is hosting its developers conference. Among the initiatives, Apple unveiling new operating systems for the Mac and iPhone. It is creating a health kit app aimed at monitoring all aspects of your personal health. Do you want Apple to know that? It's turning iCloud into a file storing system, similar to Dropbox. Technology expert Max Raskin joins us now with more on what we can expect from the conference and what Apple has announced so far. Max, any surprises from Apple?
The real surprise is the direct competition with Dropbox. So Dropbox and other file sharing services have been allowed to kind of proliferate, and Apple hasn't really done anything to go after them. And now they've sort of, in their new operating system, taken them on head on.
Yeah, this is a little bit of a change in course for Apple, right? Did Apple just see sort of this getting away to the Dropboxes of the world?
Well, they always had this service, like a lot of other things that Apple kind of has kicking around. But now they're making a big push for it. And if I was Dropbox, I'd be a little nervous.
And they're preparing, I think, for an IPO soon, so they might be a little bit concerned. The general theme that seems to be coming out of this is that this wasn't about hardware. This is about the Apple ecosystem and keeping as many people in it as possible.
Yeah, so this is the Apple Developer Conference. So this is, you saw an update to their mobile operating system, a new one called iOS 8, which has, as you mentioned, the Health Kit, and then an update to the Mac operating system for the laptop and for their desktop computers, which they're calling Yosemite. And both of these are just designed to keep more users in the Apple ecosystem, along with the Health Kit, which is seen as leading the way for the new Apple Watch when it comes out. It's going to be able to monitor your vitals. That's what people are saying.
Is this a conference that is exciting consumers, or is this really exciting developers? And if so, what does that mean for developers?
Well, it's exciting consumers in that they, have seen a couple things that Apple has tipped their hand on, the health being one, and then the file sharing. But developers are happy that they're able to now. It's seen as opening up. Apple's seen as opening up a little bit, and you see that also happening with allowing virtual currencies. Apple just announced that they were going to allow virtual currencies, Bitcoin.
You're the Bitcoin guy.
Yeah,
so
of course.
That.
To be in their app store, and that's they're trying to court as many developers as possible.
And is Apple now going head on into the Android world, which is certainly eating up its smartphone market share, and Android is outpacing Apple significantly in that?
Well, the thing is, Android will always be a favorite among developers because they're able to give developers the ability to do whatever they want to do. Whereas with Apple, they have a pretty rigorous screening process, and developers are always going to trend towards a more open environment. Now, as a business decision, that might not be the best decision, and Apple is, trying to find this balance.
So anything that sort of disappoints people out there from this conference? The reviews have so far been pretty positive, I will say, and I'm a huge Apple fan, but the press is a little bit biased towards Apple. I tend to feel.
Yeah, well, the fun thing is that whenever the price is going up, the press is biased towards Apple. But for the past, couple months, Apple's been coming up recently, but before then, Apple had been in a bit of a slump, and everyone was beating up on it, saying that, how much further can their iPhone take them? How much further, these other tablet companies were doing better. Android, as you mentioned, was beating up on them. So, it's the time to raise your estimate is before anyone else does, not after.
That's always true. 7-to-1 stock split's set for Monday.
Yes, that should make some investors
that probably
happy.
will make some noise.
Irrationally happy.
How did Tim Cook do you think? Is he starting to get his legs in this?
Yeah, the reviews have been positive, and no news is good news on this front. As long as he doesn't botch it up, they have a great product, and he's delivering.
Okay, Max Raskin, thank you so much as always.
Thanks.
Coming up, FIFA's mess in the Middle East, and did it boot an ethics investigation? You're watching Arisexchange.
Looking at mainstream news stations where only you have a very small minority of people of color being newscasters and actually having prominent roles in the media.
In a newsroom in the United States, maybe 10% of decision makers come from communities of diversity. That's not right.
Well, diversity is important because the more complete the news is, the more accurate a picture you're getting of the world, and the more you can form an accurate opinion of things.
The vision here is not just to tell the main stories of the day, but to tell the news that other organizations don't tell, and tell it in a way that people like me, people that look like me, that look like you, are interested in.
Arise News.
Arise News.
Arise News.
Arise News. Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Welcome back to Arisexchange. Time now for our business ticker stories making news around the world. President Obama arriving in Poland today, announcing a $1 billion fund to bolster European defense capabilities. It's part of the latest attempt to reassure European allies that the U.S. has their back and would act if Russia's aggression into Ukraine spread to other parts of the region. The move coming as the president begins his 4-day visit to Europe. Here's a little of what he had to say.
I'm calling on Congress to approve up to $1 billion to support this effort, which will be a powerful demonstration of America's unshakable commitment to our NATO allies.
The fund would require approval from Congress. It would pay for the increased military exercises and stepped up U.S. presence in Europe, including further Navy deployments to the Black and Baltic Seas. The U.S. Justice Department has thwarted a cyber crime ring that sought to steal millions from consumers in the U.S. and elsewhere. A multinational law enforcement operation disrupted 2 major cyber threats, Game Over Zeus and a malicious software known as CryptoLocker. Good names. Game Zeus stole banking passwords, diverting more than $100 million to bank accounts of criminals across the globe, while CryptoLocker locked users out of their own computers until they paid a ransom. It's estimated criminals collected over $27 million from that scheme. Former Miami Dolphins quarterback Dan Marino is among the latest football players to file a concussion-related lawsuit against the National Football League. The Hall of Famer and 14 other former NFL players filed the lawsuit in federal court in Pennsylvania last week. The NFL and the plaintiffs agreed on a $765 million settlement last year, but that was rejected by a federal judge who said the settlement would not be enough. Tomorrow, by the way, we will speak with former New York Giant Harry Carson, an outspoken critic of the NFL. Seattle has approved a minimum wage for $15 an hour. Small businesses have 7 years to meet that goal, while big businesses have 3. It's an increase of more than 60% from Seattle's current minimum wage of $9.32 an hour, and this makes it the highest minimum wage in the nation. And if you are watching us from the comfort of your parents' home, you may be a millennial. According to Deutsche Bank, which tracks the number of 18 to 34-year-olds living with their parents, 30% in this age bracket are moving back home after college. A combination of student loan debt, a tough job market, and lack of affordable housing are seen as contributing factors. Allegations of corruption threaten to overshadow the World Cup, which begins in 10 days in Brazil. However, an internal investigation by FIFA, the world governing body of soccer, hasn't anything to do with the upcoming sporting events in Brazil, but rather the 2022 World Cup in Qatar. The multi-billion-dollar World Cup bid from the tiny Gulf nation is in question after new allegations of bribery surfaced, bringing calls for the tournament to be moved. Here to talk more about these allegations is Mike Baco, sports managing editor at dailynational.com. Mike, welcome to Arisexchange.
Thank you.
So let me start. What are the allegations, and is anyone surprised that FIFA is not exactly the most upstanding group?
FIFA, not the most upstanding group. Qatar, not the most upstanding group. Basically, the
So
allegations... together, what you're looking at is possibly Qatar getting the 2022 World Cup taken away from them. That's the hope, I guess, if you're an impartial observer looking at the evidence that's been laid out, specifically in the Sunday Times. Where we stand right now...
Sunday Times of London.
Sunday Times of London. Basically, where we stand right now is Mohammed bin Hammam, a former Qatari soccer official who, let's get it out on the table, was stripped of his role in the Middle Eastern Soccer Federation because of some corruption in the past. $5 million worth of alleged bribes handed out to voting members.
Yeah, and what basically is accused here is the voting members are other countries, correct?
Yes.
Who then vote on where this went.
Exactly.
Is there evidence that senior FIFA executives knew about this?
Whether they knew about it or not, no one's obviously going to come out and say that. But you could tell FIFA's president, Blatter, came out and said, we may have made a mistake awarding Qatar the games. I think he was hedging his bets there a little bit, talking about the 110-degree weather and some of the infrastructure.
Well, I was about to say that they're going to actually play it in the winter.
Well, they're thinking about doing that. It's been a situation where when it's that hot and you have to build domes and you have to build so much infrastructure, you're seeing what's happening now in Brazil, trying to build as much infrastructure as they can. Some of those stadiums might not be up to par with what we've had in the past.
I'll talk about Brazil in a moment. You mentioned the president of FIFA. He kind of wants to be president for life.
He does. He's up in 2015.
That's right, and he says he's going to run again, basically, apparently. Is there a chance now that this is going to push him out?
I think there are forces inside of FIFA that want to push him out, get some fresh blood in there. But I think there's also members inside of FIFA that don't want him pushing too hard. I think one of the things that he wants to do is not have this stain on his reign. So he may be pushing a little bit harder than a lot of people inside FIFA want.
This organization is a mess. It is governing the world's most popular sport, so it's getting away with a lot. But now, there's allegations that the exhibition games were rigged or thrown to help the standings. Where's that going?
That's another.
And this is for the Brazil games.
This is for the Brazil games. In 2010, there were some allegations that were made, came out over the weekend in the New York Times and other publications, that said that there were officials in South Africa who allowed referees to referee games that were part of an Asian syndicate of gamblers who were trying to fix the matches. So there's pretty hard and fast evidence on that. So again, it's the world's most popular game. It may be the world's most corrupt game when you look at some of these allegations.
Do they get away with this because the Americans don't have much authority here and power here, because we just don't have very strong teams, and as such, sort of the oversight that we would give maybe isn't there?
I think there's some of that, and I think FIFA likes thumbing their nose at the U.S. The U.S. came in second in 2022 to Qatar, and they have some hope that if it gets stripped from them, that they may come in and take over the games there. But I think that they like thumbing their nose at the U.S. We haven't had very competitive teams. We'll see what happens this year.
As far as Brazil goes, how are these games going to play out? The FIFA president is now criticizing people for protesting on the streets. I mean, he's sounding like, the Syrian president.
People are protesting in the streets not only against the World Cup, but what's happening in 2016 with the Summer Olympics. You're seeing increased violence in the streets. As popular as soccer is, people are looking at their own infrastructure being pushed out of slums to go into even worse slums, and they're building stadiums that are going to be used for this 2-3 week tournament that afterwards are going to be left in shambles, and they want infrastructure in their countries.
And their argument that the World Cup helps the economies of these countries simply doesn't play out.
It simply does not play out. All of the money goes into FIFA's pockets.
Right.
You may get some tourism money, but all of the money goes into FIFA's pockets.
And they have a very nice headquarters in Geneva.
Indeed.
Mike Baco from thedailynational.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ahead, a judge ruled out of order. Our favorite person of the day is coming up. You're watching Arisexchange.
If I was building my own news network, first thing I think I'd want high-quality reporters, very educated, intelligent people.
Hello, I'm Francesca Maxime.
I'm Julian Phillips.
I'm Wendy Gillette.
I'm Sophia Song Hai.
I'm Gary Anthony Ramsey. Thank you for joining us here in New York City.
I would like to see more people of color represented in high positions in media.
We've got world-class journalists, veteran journalists who have been in this industry for decades, not just in front of the camera, but behind the scenes as well.
People need to understand the problems that are going on in the community are much closer than we actually think they are.
Kayla Phillips is one of the shoppers who is suing Barney's, and she is here with her attorney. What is it that you want from them?
Not to judge every African-American person that comes in their store.
Pull up to the bar for liquid lunch, things that make us want to drink. A British man thinks he's found a way to help sell his beat-up 1990 Volkswagen Golf on eBay. He's showing off the car with a sex doll standing next to it. That's not his girlfriend there. Agnes Dean hopes, could be his girlfriend, Agnes Dean hopes the life-size doll will attract some eyes to his ad for the car. Not clear how much he's asking for the car and whether the doll, named Sandy, comes with it. It's good for the high occupancy lanes, by the way, to put a doll in there. That takes us to our favorite person of the day, when we pick one person who grabbed our attention and not for the right reasons. They often say, tell it to the judge, but one Florida jurist handed out his own version of Southern justice by getting into a fist fight with a defense attorney in the courthouse. Judge John Murphy got angry with public defender Andrew Weinstock when Weinstock refused to waive his client's right to a speedy trial. Murphy at first said, quote, if I had a rock, I would throw it at you. Then he challenged him to a fight. Here's the audio.
If you want to fight, let's go out back and I'll just beat your ass.
Thank you. Yep, thank you.
Not sure who they were rooting for there. In the hallway, the two were actually heard slugging it out. Other public defenders are coming to the judge's defense, saying he had a long and outstanding legal career. We'd like to see Judge Judy take this approach sometime. And so Judge John Murphy is our favorite person of the day. Next, in one state, you need a license to be a florist. Really? A florist? A special regulatory police state is ahead. You're watching Arisexchange.
If I was building my own news network, I think I'd want broad, in-depth knowledge of important issues throughout the world.
I would want to recruit a fairly diverse staff that had different life experiences before they came to news.
We want to see how we can help ourselves and help benefit other people, and not just see what's up with the celebrities and where they're going and traveling and buying this and buying that.
If I were to build my own news network, it would certainly have to reflect a diversity of culture, because that's the global situation, that's the global reality.
I would probably bring a lot of personal stories, really personal stories from the leaders of all countries.
If I was to build my own news network, I would just have people from all over who are very connected and diverse.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Do you know how many jobs require a state license these days? It varies state by state. Let's give you some examples. In Minnesota, you need more hours of training to become a cosmetologist than a lawyer. Louisiana is the only state in the country that requires licenses for florists. Other jobs you need government permission to perform: interior design, travel agent, hairdresser, as you can see, auctioneer, home entertainment installer, to have like a stereo system put in your house. Grace Marie Turner, president of the Gallon Institute, is joining us on the phone now to tell us if these licenses are really necessary. I take it, Grace Marie, they are not. How did we get here?
Well, it's protectionism. It's not only a way for the state to generate revenue, because obviously you pay for these licenses, but it's also a way for professionals to use the power of the state to push out other competitors and even to stop innovation and new people who offer the services faster, better, cheaper. So it's a protectionist racket.
Yeah, it creates a barrier to entry. And by the way, I'm a lawyer, and even though you do need a license to practice law, and I don't think many people would dispute that, there are some legitimate questions as to whether you need 3 years of schooling here. Some of this really sounds kind of outrageous, and now there appears to be a push to sort of pull back on some of this, aren't there?
Well, there are. There actually is some effort by legislators here in Washington, Eric Cantor and others, several governors, Mike Pence in Indiana, want legislators to take a close look at this. But what happens is that the lobbies then just, really organize and say, oh, we can't possibly have unlicensed florists. People, who knows what they might produce. So there are grades of how it is important for the states to protect people. You don't want to go under the knife with an anesthesiologist, and when you are not able to make a decision about whether or not he or she is competent to do that job. But certainly, if you're getting a manicure or you're buying flowers, you can be an informed consumer and make your own decision. All of the licensure, of course, winds up not only pushing out competitors, it winds up making things more expensive.
Absolutely. And some of this, I imagine, while there is some training that goes on, and whether it's overtraining or not is another question, there are some licenses, I suspect, you just pay a fee and get the license.
Well, perhaps, but I think most of them require some certification. To be a home health aide, for example, you have to join, you have to participate in classes, you have to certify that you have a certain number of hours of training, and in order to get a certificate before you can even apply for a job. So there are very much barriers to entry, and it's not something, people will know whether or not you're qualified for the job if your employer is able to do the testing. To think that the state is doing a better job of that than somebody who has a vested interest in making sure that they're serving their customers and their clients well is really missing the mark and missing the point.
And also, do you think that the state should have some sort of recognition of other states' licensing procedures? If you're an accountant in one state, shouldn't you be an accountant in another state maybe?
Absolutely, and there is a system through which they can do that called interstate compacts. When you were driving through Texas, for example, your driver's license from New Mexico would be recognized. States have these compacts to recognize other kinds of licensure. Some states, as an attorney, you'll know that may recognize your legal degree and your legal certification from one state to another. So states can do this. And in this internet and wired world that we live in, state boundaries become irrelevant. So if you are licensed, if you're certified, if you're credentialed in whatever way in one state, then why should you have to go through all of that hassle to get it in another state? An acupuncturist, for example, there's a state boundary.
It's the same, right? If you stick needles in somebody, it's the same across state lines.
Exactly.
And
for telephone conversations with physicians, does it make any difference where he or she is when you're talking to them in the middle of the night about your sick child? No.
And Grace Marie, we only have 30 seconds. We only have 30 seconds left, but I would think that a lot of this licensing hurts people on the lower income spectrum because they have to pay more and get more training. For example, florists.
Absolutely. It not only causes them to have to pay more for the service, but it is a barrier to entry for them to be able to use what may be a natural talent and through an apprenticeship to learn that skill, which is really historically how this has been done throughout the century.
And they used to do lawyers that way, too. Grace Marie Turner from the Gallon Institute. We're out of time. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Appreciate your thoughts today. Tomorrow on Arisexchange, NFL legend Harry Carson stops by to talk about the ongoing debate surrounding the National Football League and concussions. He is very tough on the league. You are going to want to hear what he has to say. I'm Andrew Schmertz. Thanks for watching Arisexchange.